Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us this afternoon as we sit here and have our hopefully quarterly meeting that we've been trying to arrange for a while with the county commissioners. And thank you very much for coming over and visiting us and having a discussion about all things related to the city and county. Terry, anything you want to start out with?
Thank you for hosting the meeting this evening. It's always a pleasure to be here. Commissioners are eagerly awaiting your comments and concerns, and hopefully we can give staff some direction and see if there are some inequities and move forward as we should.
Yeah.
So.
It's true partners. Does anybody have any updates that they want to give at this point in time about the urban improvement project or anything like that? Try to get get caught up. I know that the city staff and county staff are working very closely and moving things along. It was great to have the governor here on Saturday. It was very telling that he is committed to Western Maryland, so we appreciate that.
Mayor, could I just say before we start with, as the president said, potential inequities and that kind of discussion, the first thing we do is, again, I think we've done it in the past, but do it again, and that's thank the commissioners. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's been a long time since we've all seen the kind of cooperation, not only between the state and the county and the Board of Ed and private, but it's really been unique, and I think those of us that have sat in office for a long time know just how unique it is. So while we always have things that we would like to discuss and make better and discuss inequities, I think we need to start out before we get there and acknowledging what we've been able to do together so far, and thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. Do you have anything that you want to
Just
cross off? Okay.
let's go.
All right. Well, I do know that one of the people on my council who was both a county commissioner and a city councilman for many years now has a few points he wants to make, and then we'll move on from there. Kristen, the floor is yours.
Talk fast.
Are you referring to me? Yes. On the particular item of fire and rescue?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just gonna pass this out then. You can pass copies around the table. Because I think that this puts into perspective pretty succinctly sort of where we're at in terms of the provision of cost allocation for fire and rescue services in Washington County and how it relates to the city of Hagerstown in particular and the other 8 towns in the county as well. So there's 2 charts here. One is one that I prepared, and the second is one that I summarized from an existing chart as it applies to the distribution of funding through the Washington County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association of their funding allotment. And the first chart's pretty simple. It has the jurisdiction, has the population, the number of homes, the number of square miles in each jurisdiction, and the density. You can see the city of Hagerstown obviously has the highest density population of any of the municipalities in the county, as well as the county as a whole. It's about 10 times more dense than the county as a whole. We also have one of the lowest household incomes. I believe we are only surpassed in that category by Hancock. And what I did was I located the budgets. This is the general fund budgets of the other local jurisdictions, the municipalities, as well as the county budget, the tax rate, and the property taxes that are generated from each of our respective tax rates. And then the next column is how much we respectively spend on public safety. That's police, fire, rescue, all of those public safety items that we provide service for, and what portion of that specifically that we spend on fire. And you can see the city, that number is all these numbers are a year or 2 old. I believe the city number is a little higher, obviously, at this point. But the next column is the most important for me in this chart, and what that shows is a percentage of our total budgetary expense. as it applies to fire. And you can see on average, most of the towns across the county spend about 0 to 2% of their funds on fire. There are obviously no municipality in the state of Maryland, I believe, save for Baltimore City, is obligated to provide fire service. Hagerstown is one of 4 towns within the state of Maryland that continues to provide a paid fire service. It's us, Cumberland, Annapolis, and Salisbury. Annapolis enjoys a 50-cent, I believe last time I checked it was 50-cent tax differential for its duplicated services. Salisbury actually gets a payment in lieu of from the county to the town for the provision of that paid fire service. But here, the county is second to the city. It spends about 4.5% of its budget its budget on fire service, and I took EMS, 911, those things out of this specifically, so I'm just talking about fire service. The city spends about 17.5%, or about 4 times that amount respectively, proportionally of its budget on fire service for the paid fire service that we provide in the city. And again, we spend on those 5 or 6 stations what the county provides to the 26 or 27 stations countywide in that allocable process. The figure of that 17%, though, to put it in general terms, equates to about 36 cents of our property tax rate. To the average property owner in Hagerstown, it's about $1,200 total that we pay in city taxes. Me, an average homeowner, I pay about $1,200 in city taxes. So about $400 of that money goes to fire service. One column that I also included is the 911 center. The city is the only municipality that's required to pay an amount toward the 911 center. It's about $400,000 a year. If you want to put that in its simplest terms, the average taxpayer in Washington County pays about $75 in your county taxes to fund those 911 operations. The average city taxpayer pays an additional $24 per house toward that because we pay the additional $400,000 on top, and so it comes out to about $24. So we pay about 25% higher for that basic service. That gets me down to the next chart, and all I did was take all the municipalities again. All the municipalities except for Keedysville have a fire station in the municipality. Most of those provide to a larger due area, and basically this is just a summary of how those funds are distributed currently by the County Rescue Association. I'm not asking or looking at the commissioners saying, hey, you know, you need to or you have some authority to change this. I'm simply pointing out the basic fact that the stations, the volunteer stations that happen to exist within the city of Hagerstown are clearly treated much differently in the distribution of that funding than the other stations. And I use the basic example, Boonesborough has 2 stations, it gets 2 full allocations, okay, of that money. City has 5 or 6 stations, and we have to divide that allocation among those 6 stations, and that's just one example. But I use the figure at the end of per capita distribution, and if you look at the population base of each of those municipalities, and then you look at the total allocation that each of those municipalities volunteer fire stations, or the stations that happen to be in those municipalities, receive, you can see it ranges anywhere from 125 to 250,000, or on average ranges anywhere from $45 per capita to $430 per capita in distribution of those funds. City of Hagerstown is $5.70 per capita. We're actually about half, if you even take out the 6 stations that exist outside of those municipalities, we're actually about half of what I'll call non-municipal located volunteer stations receive. They're at about $9 per capita. Coincidentally, if you take that same county portion at that bottom line of that second chart, and you take it over and you see it's providing roughly $825,000, if the volunteer stations that exist in the city were to be accounted for the same exact way that those volunteer stations are outside of all the municipalities, it's the same number, 6 and 6, we'd be getting about $825,000 in allocation instead of the $230,000. At the end of the day, if you look at those three components that I put together, it's clear there are three issues here. One, we pay about $400,000 for a 911 center, that nobody else is asked to pay that extra amount. That's about 2 cents on our tax rate. And I tried to explain this at the State of the City, to a very difficult degree. The second is, in terms of allocation of those volunteer companies, all of which are required to provide due areas to one another, not our paid system, the volunteer system. That volunteer side of just the stations in the city is shorted, if you will, by about $500,000 to $600,000. Again, about 2.5 cents on the tax rate. Right there is 4 to 5 cents that the city has to pick up right out of the gate in its budget that no other entity is asked to do on both sides of that equation. The last item that I would pose is going back to that first chart. Again, the average city property owner pays about $400 in taxes for that paid portion of a fire system. That fire system, I hope that everyone is aware at this point, an increasing amount of that paid side of the city fire system is going more and more often outside of the city limits, picking up those due area issues that arise from time to time and don't have access to the same amount of allocable funding that's distributed to those other strictly volunteer entities. They just don't. But they're required to pick up that loss. And the differential there for me, if you equate it, is about $200 to $300 per household. And I think I spoke to this issue at the ESAC, the last ESAC meeting that I attended. That's the number. It's about $200 to $300 or about 8 to 12 cents differential that the city simply does not get accounted for. And I'm not here saying at all, and I know I'm probably in the minority of this body when I say that, I'm not saying that we have to get accounted for that differential, that 8 to 12 cents. What I'm saying is if the expectation moving forward is that the paid portion of the city fire system, that $9 million fire system that our taxpayers pay for, is expected to be sent outside of the city, then there should be some compensation for that. If there's not, then I think that the city should discontinue sending its paid apparatus and manpower outside of the city to cover those due areas, because what that says to me as a city taxpayer is I'm paying $400 a year in taxes for a paid fire system that could at any time be sitting in Hancock or Smithsburg or Boonesboro or Mount Etna or those other places, again, and that's just the paid side. I understand the volunteer system works in those duplicative fashion, but I don't think that it is obligated to work that way. And in speaking of obligation, and I've said this, it isn't worth it to me as an elected official to ever want to give up that paid city fire system, the portion of that paid system to the county, for what amounts to about a $200 credit to the average homeowner in the city. It's just not. I just wouldn't do that. At the same time, I put into perspective, some years back, Frederick City handed over its paid fire system to the county. Said, you know what? This is becoming too great of an expense for us. The county is not taking the reins to address this issue. We're going to hand over our paid system to the county, and immediately it saved Frederick City $12.5 million a year. And I have to look at that number and say, that's a significant chunk of funding. Ours is about $9 million to the city. That's a significant chunk of funding. And so for me, I think that the issue is that simple and present. And if it were me proposing something to you for consideration, it would be that we look at these in three parts. The first part would be that the city not continue to provide the $400,000 to the 911, maybe in year 1 and 2. Next step would be some type of fairness distribution reallocated to those volunteer companies in their respective fashions that doesn't exist now. And the third item would be, if the county isn't interested in the endeavor of the escalation in paid service side, then I think a differential has to be discussed between the bodies on this particular item. I'm not into the items of all those other things that we do, because I think this is the one sort of clear and concise item that I can look at, and I can look at a chart like this and say, there is a clear presence of inequity here. So that's my 2 cents on the issue.
Thank you, Chris.
You know, back in 2009, when the city and the county, when the city combined its dispatchers with 911 center, and we, for lack of a better word, we're charged with picking up that cost of our employees over the 911 center. You know, to us, it seemed like, it was definitely a cost savings, because we didn't have to upgrade our radio systems, we didn't have to do any of that stuff. But if you think about it, our dispatchers at the 911 center for the last basically 9 years have, dispatched police and fire and everything else to places all over the county, not just the city of Hagerstown. That's not how it works out there. Every dispatcher gets a call. They dispatch wherever they have to dispatch to. So, for 9 years, we paid this. It started out the first year, I think it was $386,000. So roughly, over $3 million to the 911 center, and we're paying to dispatch people to Sharpsburg and Keysville and Hancock and Boone's Bar and every place else. In 2012, there was a vote taken in this very chambers to allocate $400,000 a year that we were paying to the 911 center to projects in the downtown area. Now, that was specifically at that time focused on a multi-use sports and event center. But we have projects going on in downtown all the time. And don't get me wrong, you guys listen, and Lou said it very succinctly at the beginning of this meeting, the partnership that we have together on this urban improvement project, and our portion that we're giving to the Maryland Theater and the Plaza and those kind of things, that's very, very much appreciated, and it shows real commitment from the county to do great things in Hagerstown and Washington County. But this $400,000 a year, as Kristen's alluded to, is nearly 2 cents on our tax rate. And we're still funding projects, and we're still doing things, and we just voted to raise taxes this coming year so that we can continue to see some change and be able to invest in projects in the city of Hagerstown. That $400,000 would go a long way over the next 2 years to help, have more projects that happen in the city of Hagerstown, and not just in downtown, because we're not just focused on downtown. We're focused on, abandoned properties in the north end and the south end, and, we're focused on, how do we lift all ships, and we're doing it on the back of our taxpayers.
How much of that is based, when you get your figures, how much of this is affected by the fact that your tax assessments have lowered?
How much of what is affected by it?
When you put the numbers here, you're talking about $400,000. How much of that's attributed to the fact that your assessments have gone down?
Well, I don't think any of it's attributed. The average penny on the tax rate in the city of Hagerstown is about $12 per penny, okay? The average penny on the tax rate, and the average penny county tax generates about 15 bucks.
Values are lower,
yep,
where you're trying to get your tax base.
But if the assessed values change, it wouldn't change the percentages here.
I understand. I'm talking about the dollars, though. I'm talking about the $400,000.
It's about
if your assessed values increased,
Right.
Like the county has been able
That's
to
what I'm
enjoy
saying.
over
The county's about
the
county's about
years.
15
right.
bucks a penny. So what I'm saying is we're right at about 12 bucks a penny right now. So somewhere, over the last 10 years, let's say, as those assessments have changed, they've declined now another 10 years, but they may have went from 15 bucks down to 12 bucks. So that's the margin of change, if you will, within that timeframe. You know, if they increase, sure, then that 400,000 becomes, you know, 1.8 pennies or 1.6 pennies. It just depends on what that assessable valuation is.
And when you look at, you know, Boonesboro, Smithburg, I mean, you're using the population of the municipality itself,
That's right,
okay, not the population of the county.
that's right.
So it's,
Same as done for the stations within the city of Hagerstown.
so I guess when I look at a paid fire system, if you pull that out of the calculations, and did I hear you say that you're not talking about you've pulled out the paid portion or not?
That's correct.
Okay.
What's represented in chart 1 is the paid side of things,
Okay, and then you.
respectively.
and you-
Because if you look at if you look at the fire expense column, that's the actual figure that those various jurisdictions, including the county, provide to that system,
Okay.
whether it's volunteer or paid. So, by example, I talked to.
So that's total, that's
That's
total.
right. When I
Okay.
talked to Williamsport, Williamsport right now gives $25,000 a year to the fire company to offset the costs associated with the necessity for a part-time driver. So that town recognizes the need for that at that particular volunteer station in that particular municipality and provides funding, you know, proportionate to that recognized need. Now, whether that's the actual need or not, that's the level of funding they're willing to recognize that need at, whereas Smithsburg provides 0, and Hancock provides 4,000 to each its fire and its EMS.
And you're saying that.
Keedysville gives $1,000 to Boonesboro and $1,000 to Sharpsburg because they recognize those are the two stations that most often respond to them.
I guess I played a little dumb here. I didn't realize that you have that many volunteer stations that are recognized as one fee. Is that what you're saying? You were saying about the number of.
Sure. We have, good example is Boonesboro has 2 stations, one inside of town and one outside of town that was largely started as sort of a satellite station, you know, 15 years ago. And I remember, I think I was commissioner at the time, where they said, okay, this satellite station in South County is becoming too overwhelmed with call volume. It can't be treated as a satellite association. We need to make it fully compensated station. That's great. So now Boonesboro, as a station entity, gets 2 allocations of money, full allocations. City of Hagerstown, for as long as we can all remember, has had 5 or 6 stations, right? And their money gets divided, number one, and then they also don't have access to a number of the, and if you look at the chart here, they don't have access to fire apparatus testing, fire and fuel maintenance, response assist. Just that money alone for those stations is a loss of almost $200,000 that those stations don't get, that every other volunteer station in this county receives equally.
Can I interrupt? I think for me, the appropriate thing to do is to take all of these facts that Kristen has provided, let's get them to staff, the volunteer companies or whoever's involved, and to see, because I'm sure our staff's gonna have a rebuttal to some of these
Well, I
numbers.
didn't know
And then they can come back to us to see if there are some adjustments that need to be made, and then we could go from there.
You guys don't make the adjustments in this bottom chart.
that's right, it's,
Your association makes those
Association, that's right.
determinations. What I'm saying is those determinations have been made over time, in part because the city has, as an entity, said, we'll pick up these other things. And then when you look at that differential and the county says, you know what, we don't account for fire in the differential equation, that's fine, I understand that. But then in the same token, you can't say, but city, keep picking up these other items. A good example is when the county just passed the $25,000 per station cost allocation, right? So we were in those meetings and they said, hey, each company that has $25,000, you know, to spend, if you will, before it gets those additional personnel for those so many number of hours, right? And it said very specifically, except the stations within the city of Hagerstown. We're not eligible for that money. We're not eligible because we provide paid fire personnel within those stations. Well, the reality is there isn't a single station in this county at this point that doesn't have to, in some manner, provide some type of paid part-time staffing level.
In addition to the paid salaries, the city fire companies also don't get any funding assistance for ladder testing, maintenance, fuel, hose testing, insurance, to keep the vehicles running that they send out into the county as well.
But associations don't handle this too.
And the last thing I want to add is an aside, because sometimes we all sort of forget this, especially when Kristen says, well, maybe the paid staff shouldn't go outside of the city. And, you know, people look at you like, what are you, nuts? You have to. And, yeah, on the moral side, you have to. But on the legal side, you know, the county, everybody in this city is a county resident. So the county does have an obligation to send their equipment into the city when needed. The city paid staff is going outside to the county without any compensation, and because obviously it's a necessity to do it. But that's the other thing we just need to be sure of. Sometimes, I know not at this table, but sometimes our citizens sort of forget that issue, so that when we talk about the $400,000, one of the answers may be, well, geez, the majority of the calls come from the city, so you guys should pay for it. And the answer is, yeah, we are when we pay county taxes. So that's my only point, as long as it's not part of the set-off, and I understand that. And thank you again for being here and everything you guys are doing.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments from the commissioners or anything?
I would just thank Kristen and the council for their diligence in putting these numbers together. Again, to echo Commissioner Baker, I would like staff to take a look at this and provide some recommendations to us, something I certainly might be interested in. You know, I would think that if we are all using the same company or the same contracts for a certain testing that's required, there might be some economies of scale, and that could help the city out, you know, certainly a little bit. I'd like to see if there's a possibility we could incorporate the city companies into that, see what the cost would be. That's just an initial thought that I have.
Ron, I have a question. I mean, can anybody at this table, because I know that I can't, can anybody at this table explain how we got the 12.5 cent set-off back in 2010, and what it encompassed, and what departments, and what duplicated services?
I can give you a little, obviously I was in the county at the time, but I wasn't here at this table at the time. But we did some research with our CFO. In fact, our CFO went and discussed this with Al Martin, who was at the table at the time. And this is my only copy, but you can certainly have it. That's a letter from your office that explains what was requested. And at the time, from understanding, that was approved based on a model that came from another location within the state of Maryland. So it seemed to be an agreeable offset at the time, and one that met the satisfaction of both parties.
Were you mayor at that time?
My signature. I was mayor at that time.
Senility is a wonderful thing.
Oh, no. Trust me, I'm not senile when it comes to this issue.
I mean, I can tell you, this is the report that was created in 2010 when we did that. This is the tax differential report that staff worked on. This is the summary document that came out of that. You know, so both those documents are from that period, and they outline in detail why certain things were included and why things were excluded. You know, as a commissioner at that time, you know, one of the inferences that were made, especially as it relates to fire and rescue service, was this. It was pretty plain. You know, the volunteer system is more than adequate to provide the level of service needed in this county, and therefore, based on that assumption, what the city is providing in terms of a paid system is simply above and beyond what's necessary in this county and shouldn't be included in the differential. That was probably, you know, a marginally winnable argument at that time. 10 years later, I don't think that argument is any longer applicable. I didn't think it was applicable then, so I would, all I'm saying is, you know, for me, you can point to that sort of singular item, and it's fairly clear that things don't work the way they did. even 10 years ago. But anybody's more than welcome to this report.
Certainly. First, what we need to do is be able to listen to the city and staff and work with Valerie. We would like to point out that it does seem at the time, and maybe as President Baker has said, that we will certainly take the board's approach and revisit with city staff, because maybe it needs to be reassessed. But at the time, it did seem as though it met the satisfaction of all parties. That was the nature of the discussion at the time. There are other instances, for instance, the Board of Ed, which is entirely paid by Washington County, which is not in the offset. So it's a very complex structure that would be incredibly difficult, certainly without any visuals, to go into and explain here. And I'm not trying to justify it either, because that letter was written in '09, I believe, and I don't believe the offset was settled until 2010 or so. So that alone took a year. I don't think we'll be able to settle it here.
No.
But listening is certainly the first part of that. There is something I would like to just clarify, and this doesn't necessarily mean it's right or wrong, but as far as the 911 operation goes, we did look at 4 staff members, and those, with overtime and so forth, are paid $412,000, remarkably similar to the $400,000. But to go a step further, because with staff, I have taken a very close look at emergency services. It's incredibly important. There is no more important subject to, I don't think, the county or the city than emergency services and 911 operations. So while we're looking at career paths, reliability, and accountability in all those positions, and Dave Hayes, Emergency Services, is here, the director, what we're looking at, and what I became very familiar with, is the sheriff's office has 2 positions, which are all 911 employees, by the way. They're not anything else than county employee 911 employees. Sheriff's office has 2 seats, 450,000 minus the 40,000 that live in the city. So that's about 110,000. The police department, City of Hagerstown, has 2 seats for the 40,000. So that is what it is. The fire and EMS has 2 seats. The 911 has 2 seats. The supervisors have 2 seats. There's 2 supervisors for every shift, so there's redundancy in supervisors. During a power shift, which are the busiest times, there's another additional seat. So at any one time, the least number of people that you're going to have there is 10 seats and 10 people. So the 400,000, while it certainly is beneficial and helpful, it doesn't cover all the bases of even the 2 seats for the Hagerstown Police Department. It doesn't say that it's right or wrong, or it shouldn't be changed, or it should be changed. I'm simply want to bring to you the number of people in that 911 center each day, and that doesn't even begin to explain the support staff that are behind those 10 to 11 people that are there 24/7, 365. Because if my calculations are correct, it takes about, just for those 4 people, it takes about 4 people to run a 24/7, 365 operation. So to have 2 there, that's double. And so even if you look at the 2 city seats, the county is still paying up to half of that. Again, doesn't mean we can't listen further, but I just wanted that to be understood as far as a baseline of where we are. And the other thing, I'd have to talk to, I think, both the chief and our director, and even volunteer fire of Dale Hill, can correct me if I'm wrong, and I would ask that they do, because if it's not a cooperative relationship going into and out of the city, then I think something is wrong. But from my understanding, the police and rescue, the fire services do go in and out of the city and support one another.
Yeah, we definitely go out.
Yes.
Okay. But we
get
also,
support. We absolutely get support from outside stations, especially Long Meadow, Halfway, Funktown. Yeah,
Okay.
there's no question about that. The point that was being made is those stations have an obligation to come into the city. The city doesn't the paid portion. Volunteers have joint mutual obligations.
Sure.
Our paid staff doesn't have that obligation.
I see.
We're not threatening that we're not going to do it.
I understand
And we
that.
never have not done it. That's just the point that we're trying to make, because our paid staff does get, the biggest fear we've ever had is 3/4 of our department is outside the city fighting a major fire when a fire occurs in this city. And all our paid personnel are out fighting a county fire in the midst of it. And we get no financial recognition from it. That's the big issue. There's no issue about mutual aid by everybody, and that is not about the stop.
Okay. Yeah. That
But
probably.
when you're out in the county, I believe our volunteer companies have it covered to come into the city if need be.
Well,
That's right. Volunteer stations are obligated to cover their first and second due overlapping areas. I have no issue with that.
I'm just,
no, absolutely. Volunteers to the degree that they exist. But again,
so you do have coverage.
oh, absolutely, Kerry, absolutely. Assuming they're there, when we talk about a major issue, as we know, you end up bringing units from Chambersburg before it's all done, when we have major issues. But yeah, that's the concern.
Okay, anything, you have any more to add? It's your meeting.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to point out that
Sorry.
in case people thought I actually was senile, this letter dated December 30th, 2009, was to reiterate the fact to have conversations about a tax set-off that expanded just police, parks, and roads, which is what we always got prior to that. That was it. And then in 2010, it was enacted, and I know that Mr. Alshire wasn't in favor of the way it was enacted, because he wanted it at least phased in, but in 2010, it wasn't phased in, it was just enacted, and the tax set-off was given to the citizens, and the rebate form that we used to be, which we used to use, was not given to the general fund of the city of Hagerstown. So, and again, all these issues and departments in here, when we talk about, suppression, or education suppression services, or grants supporting them, water, sewer, operating transfers, county golf course, public works, planning, zoning permits, inspections, and portions of the general administrative supporting services, including budget, finance, information technology, purchasing, treasurer's office, county attorney, human resources, administrator, commissioners, clerk, public information, central services, general operations, county buildings, and debt service. My question still remains, where was the formula? How was it used? And, how was that number reached at 12.5 cents?
My first answer, Mayor, would be Councilman Alshire has some documents that I think try to explain that, and our CFO, and probably Al Martin at the time, were heavily involved in that, and that's probably something at staff level that we should probably be able to answer better.
And I think we
after
should,
some discussion.
right, and again, revisit those issues and see where maybe we are wanting in certain areas. That's all I've ever asked.
That's fair.
I would note that when you deliberate in your future meetings on the specific issue associated with the 911 center and the city's contribution, and you cite the folks associated and the city, quote-unquote, positions for response participation in that system, there are 3 other municipalities, Boonesboro, Hancock, and Smithsburg, all of which have municipal police departments, none of which contribute in any manner the way the city does to the 911 center for that exact same service delivery.
Good point. Okay, yeah, anything else, anybody? I mean, I don't want to, again, I want to thank you very much for coming, and hope we can continue to have open talks and figure out a way to help each other.
That's what we should do.
Yep.
I think there were 4, we had 3 of them.
All right, anybody have anything, council members?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Kiefer, for bringing that up. The blighted properties issue.
Yes.
The properties that, Mr. Hershey goes and yells on the courthouse steps to sell and nobody buys. And then, speaking to the issue of assessment depreciation, just sit in perpetuity because nobody wants to take on the liens and fines and fees and things associated with these properties. And let's just be real honest, you see more of these properties in the city than you probably do anywhere else in the county. And that's just a byproduct of the market crash and the age and quality of the stock. And I think the city has been working rather feverishly at the staff level to identify ways to abate or waive, whatever word you want to use, the city's portion of those liens and fines and fees, because we recognize that at the end of the day, for all of our taxable purposes, it benefits us to have those properties in good order and occupied than it does sitting vacant and abandoned. And all we're asking the commissioners for is the same expeditious approach at coming on board with us to also participate in some type of waiver or what have you of these county side fines and fees and liens, so that we can actually see some of these properties, be sold and be fixed up and be reoccupied. And right now, I don't know where it stands with staff, but I know staff has had conversation with Todd Hershey's office, and we're just trying to get some direction from the county commissioners, that you'll help in expediting that process.
Because face it, no one's getting those fines and fees or back taxes.
You're not getting them back.
We're not getting them. So
We
we
accept
might
that.
as well figure out a way to move forward from that point and make them into productive properties that actually do pay taxes and those kind of things.
And at staff level, we've reached out to Valerie to let her know, and it's been a mutual discussion that we're very much receptive, as much as at staff level as can be. I do believe one of the commissioners, as a board, one of the concerns is to waive the fees to make sure that the same party that those fees are waived from doesn't buy it back
No,
and
no,
basically
exactly, yeah.
save.
That was our
Oh, yeah.
concern.
So, yeah,
We don't
it's-
wanna.
Yeah, we're not trying to award the offenders.
Right.
And staff and the city attorney are also still looking at the new legislation that was passed just recently to see what kind of value that has for us and what kind of extra tools it might give us
Mhm.
to do that.
Right.
So we are in that process
We're all on the
of
same page with it.
reviewing that. Yep.
I'd like to see if maybe there's a possibility, I don't know, if our representative staffs need to get together, or maybe
Yeah, we can.
the officials ourselves to get together to look and see if there might be an opportunity to offer some kind of incentive, even over above waiving the fees that accumulate on the properties, especially for owner-occupied properties.
And I think that's a great point, which gets to the discussion we had as a body. One of the reasons that the majority voted to increase the tax rate above and beyond, what we initially discussed, was one of the things part and parcel to that first third program that this additional funding would pay for, is, the additional 3 cents gets us about an additional $800,000, okay? To the average taxpayer like me in the city, that means an additional $36 to $40 a year. But with that $36 to $40, what that gets the city at the end of the day is an additional $800,000, of which we can reinvest or backfill the pot of the first third money. If anyone has recalled, what has been done at the Grand or over here at the Patterson, or even 38 to 50 homes in the city, when we had the first third grant the first time around, all 38 grants available for owner-occupied housing were taken up in the first year. And what that basically says is And in the way it's been pitched this time is, you know, of that money, we'd set about $75,000 aside for any homeowner or any prospective buyer that identifies a home that's been vacant for more than 12 months would get $7,500 toward the, whatever it takes to fix the home up or put the down payment on the house to get that house reoccupied within that neighborhood. And so I think it speaks to that incentive process, you know, and I only use this as a pitch back to the $400,000 that we pay for the 911 center. I can tell you very flatly, me personally, as one council member, my thought was, you know, if we did get credit back for that, that $200,000 of that would go to make sure that that program is $1 million for next year, and that the other $200,000 would go to address some of the shortfall that we're having with the UIP, namely the Maryland Theater amount. And that's just me speaking as one person. I don't know if we're supposed to talk like that, you know, about that type of funding, but if it were me, that's exactly what I would do with that money, and it would go to address one of those very things that you're talking
You know,
about.
that's certainly a possibility. I was kind of thinking more along the lines of, if you're not collecting the tax revenues on those properties now, if there's the taxes for the eventual property owner that turns it into their home that they live in, if they get a tax break for not giving them money up front necessarily, but if you're not collecting that tax money now, if it's kind of better that you don't collect that tax money maybe for the next 3 years, and you have someone living in it and making the property look a little better, that way the neighborhood looks a little better. Just an idea that could be a nice model.
Yes, this is in Baltimore. They've done that. The families are moving to the county because of the fact that the tax rate on a 2,000 square foot home was twice as much in the city as it was in the county, so they lowered the taxes to that 2,000 to the county level, and for a period of time.
Those properties that took part in those incentives early on, a couple of years ago, have you gone back to look at those properties just in an unofficial way to see, you know, has the program worked? Has it really improved that particular neighborhood?
We had staff bring us in a presentation last year or 2 years ago where they provided some pictures, and I can tell you that from those pictures, at least 2 of those homes in that presentation staff gave, there was no way you'd be able to look at that place and say that was the same house before and after. No way. One that I recall on Guilford and
So
one
on that
on
particular
Chestnut.
house, how much did that increase the assessed value of the home?
We probably won't know till next year.
Yeah, because we've got the 3-year period. But I can tell you right now what's happening in this city very flatly on assessments as it applies to this county. About 80% of the city continues that decline in assessable base. It does. And the 20%, which happens to be largely in the north end, is sort of picking up that slack. I mean, that's just the reality. And so, you know, if you look at all the assessable areas in Washington County, save for maybe Hancock area, the city is largely the sole declining area, you know, in your assessment re-ups countywide. And that's sort of the reality that this First Third program is trying to climb beyond, where we're focusing, you know, significant funding for the downtown buildings that take a lot more money than we can come up with. But our objective is to get the private developers to invest the lion's share in privately, like this Patterson right over here, or the professional art building right down, you know, next to the UIP. We're trying to focus some of that money on getting homeowners, you know, back in. We're trying to focus on small business development. A good example is First Third program was used on the old Nolan building, right next to the Burhans Boulevard overpass. And that building's been vacant, as, you know, since I was a kid, and the overpass got built, you know, and because of that funding, Stan Lee came in and invested money into it and used the program. One additional caveat that I'd like to add in to the program moving forward is a rental component, where landlords that want to create market rate housing would get an incentive amount for their investment in the property to create, you know, nice market rate rental property. So.
All right, sounds like staff has some work set out for them. We appreciate your time, we want to get you out of here. Jeff, is you,
Received the message.
receiving my message, you gonna make it down there in time?
My niece is being honored today. She's a two-time state champion in track and field, shot put discus for Williamsport. She's being recognized today, so please make that part of the record.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate your time. Next meeting in 3 months at your place. Please have food.
Sir.
All right, welcome back. Jen, you're up. Talk about cell tower.
That was fast. So I am here today seeking some direction on essentially two issues. As we all know, an appeal or a judicial review has been sought by a group of, or actually by a neighboring individual, appeal of the Board of Zoning Appeals decision regarding the cell tower, proposed cell tower at North Hagerstown High School. The state code requires that the board address some, we'll call them ministerial duties, things like preparing the record, filing the record, issuing notice to interested parties. They have thus far been doing that. I've been consulting, but I have not entered in the circuit court on their behalf. I would ask your permission today to at least do that so that our office can assist them in making sure that any procedural requirements are met. I am also here today seeking direction from you as to whether or not the city intends to participate in the appeal. We're coming up on the deadline for that. Mid-June, the 17th, 18th. That deadline is dictated by when notice was sent to the interested parties. Participation, as of right now, the city has standing to participate, and that's by virtue of the state code. If the city does not participate at the circuit court level, it won't have a voice, it won't have any ability to be heard, not just on the heart of the issue, but on any unforeseen or unpredictable issues that may come up in the course of the hearing, whether they're beneficial or adverse to the city. I would also note that the board's ability to participate meaningfully in any sort of judicial review is unclear. They certainly cannot appeal an unfavorable decision out of the circuit court, but case law also is unclear about their ability to participate at the circuit court level. And I guess I would point out, I mentioned unpredictable, unforeseeable. I can't predict, but I know that the courts can do some things that we don't expect sometimes. And I wanted to sort of illustrate that point. I wanted to just give you an example of something that happened in a court case. And this is not directly factually on point, but it gives you an example of, well, I wouldn't have expected that, but there's a Maryland case out there where the Planning Commission appealed, although there was a favorable ruling, they were able to appeal because there was an adverse, the court, within that there was one point that was adverse, and that was the trial court indicated that a site plan review was not contested under the Administrative Procedures Act. That ruling then meant that instead of having a 30-day appeal period, these planning commission decisions could be subject to attack under declaratory or injunctive action for a 3-year period rather than 30 days. So that's something that I wouldn't have predicted coming out of that case, but so I point that out only to illustrate that if the city doesn't participate at all at the circuit court level, any ability to address any adverse ruling that comes out of that case will be prohibited by the city. The city's standing will basically expire.
Two questions. One is, does the absence of our participation in this process open the city up to any financial liability?
Not that I'm aware of, or that I could come
So,
up with at this point.
I guess my base question is, we don't participate. It goes to court. The court overturns the BZA decision. and the third party that got the approval, they can't come back and then claim, city didn't participate to fight for the decision it made, therefore.
revenue,
We
whatever.
lost revenue in this deal. Either it be the schools system, or, which I would hope they wouldn't, I mean, they're the one that created this, or the cell tower provider entity. Like, for me, that's the most critical issue, because if someone can't come back if we don't participate and say, well, we're gonna sue you because, we had this golden opportunity lined up, the court overturned it, you didn't fight for it, and
No, the city is under no obligation to
Okay.
participate. It's voluntary. And in fact, I've spoken with the attorney for the cell tower company who's acknowledged that it's the city's position that the cell tower would spearhead or would lead the defense of the opinion, or, yeah, the board's opinion, since it was their application.
yeah. I can say that I have difficulty with that, and I think that I've been pretty plain about my position on this matter, both publicly and privately, to the public as well as privately to the body, and I have no problem stating it, that I just don't agree with the decision that was made. I haven't from the outset agreed with the argument that was put forth even before the decision was made. And so for me, I'm certainly not going to support the defense of an application for appeal, under the merits of I'm defending a position that I don't agree with. I have no interest in that.
However, so this is my thought process, and Jen, you can, make sure you tell me if I'm wrong. I completely understand totally why we were not in a position to appeal. Completely understand and agree with what you've told us. However, it seems to me, we never wanted to be in that position anyways, because that's not the position of power. The position of power is when we do enter in as the city, as the interested party, and in whatever manner that you deem is the appropriate way to do it, say, we're here not as an appellant and not as the cell tower people, we're here as an interested party, being the city of Hagerstown, we have standing, and we want you to know, quite candidly, we agree with the people that appealed. We're not appealing the case, but we're an interested party, and we want you to know this is how we feel. And if that goes too far, then the answer would be, we're in here and we defer, something to make it clear to the trier, to the judge, where the city stands. And I think that's much more effective than us having done the appeal, for all the reasons that the council has told us, of all the things it would do to us. But this isn't us appealing the decision. This isn't us arguing against the position. The people who have made the appeal are making that argument, and we are entering in the case as an interested party to make it clear that we agree with the appellant, the people who have appealed.
I thought that that we weren't allowed to enter in that.
We can't do the appeal.
No, I thought we weren't even allowed to enter this in the position that we are in any way
Taking sides.
in opposition to what our body, the BZA, decided. If you're saying we can actually enter it, on behalf of the body, and then take the opposite position of the body, I would say that's news to me, and that doesn't make a lot of sense, that we would be allowed to even do that.
If we want to get into the sort of substantive discussion of what our position would be and what we can and cannot do and what the associated risks would be with that, I would recommend going into closed session.
I would agree if we hadn't all sort of already voiced our opinions very publicly on what those opinions are. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and that'd be great if we could reverse the clock and not have had half a dozen discussions and public comments about it at this point. But I mean, even just your comments now, I think, it's hard to go back and sort of speak of that in those terms in the bounds of the closed position. at this point?
So this may help clarify. So as the party seeking judicial review, the first step will be for the petitioner, the neighbor, to file a legal memorandum where he will set forth all of his arguments. And then there's a period of time in which any other parties will be able to respond to that. So, I can't predict right now what the content of his memorandum would be, but certainly as a party to the appeal, the city would be able to file a response. Ultimately, the court will decide what to do with those responses and how to treat them.
So we can file any response we want, we defer, we agree, we don't agree? But we can actually say we agree with.
We can say whatever we want. and the
Are
court
we
will
not in a
respond to
position,
that.
Jen, by not being the appellant or the appellee, of almost being analogous, at least, to an amicus brief? That we have standing, but we're neither the appellee, neither side, and our standing allows us to express our opinion as it relates to the legal arguments being made without being a party and therefore being stopped from doing anything because we didn't file the appeal.
It's possible. This is a pretty unique scenario. Most of these appeals are, and most of the case law that comes out of these opinions comes from applicants whose requests were denied.
Right.
So the city is in kind of a unique, unusual circumstance in this particular case.
Do we, and I understand how hesitant council is to talk to us in open session. It's something that always occurs, and I appreciate that. I have the feeling, however, though, that there is probably a majority on the council that if you are telling us that by entering our appearance in the case and representing the city, that you are not bound to support the decision, then I think the majority would say they want you to get in the case, and then before you make any formal response, then we meet to see what your response would be, and if that be in closed session, so be it. Does that sound like where everybody's at?
I'm not. And only because I'm the opposite of that, stepwise. In other words, I would not, as a council member, be interested in directing our legal counsel to enter it unless I knew there was a majority that shared that same opinion.
Oh,
of
well,
opposition.
that's what I'm at.
I know, but what you're saying is she enters and then we give her.
Oh, no,
opposition.
I'm
What saying
assuming.
is I'm interested in entering.
Well, Kristen,
as a
I can
body
tell you
unless
this,
there is a
I know
majority.
your feelings, I know Austin's feelings, and I know my feelings, so without asking for two other feelings, that's three right there, and I think I tend to think, and Shelley and Emily have a voice.
I don't think we should be involved. I thought we had an extensive conversation about how we can't go against the BZA's.
No. The extensive opinion we had was that we can't appeal their decision. We can't file the appeal saying that the BZA was wrong. But if we did not do that, okay, so the issue of what Jen is saying, we, by statute, even though we're not either the appellee or the appellant, by our standing as a city, we have standing to be involved in the case. By not having filed the appeal, we are not obligated to take any position at all. And what I'm saying is there are at least three that think this decision was a bad decision, and therefore, and also, Jen, if I heard you correct, we have a time frame here that if we don't enter, we're going to be barred from entering.
Correct.
Once you enter, you can always withdraw, okay? But once you don't enter in the time frame, that choice is gone. So I clearly, there's at least three on the council that aren't going to direct Jen to support the position, And your worst-case scenario could be the city enters appearance and just defers to the court, says we're not going to take a position. But what she needs to know now is, do we forever give up the right to get involved with the case, or do we enter and then we can always decide which way to proceed from there?
I guess it just feels like we are, it appears that we're entering, that we've entered into the plea. Sorry, I don't know the legal terms, these,
The appeal?
yeah.
No, we haven't, no.
It wouldn't appear that way, that, you know, it still looks like we're kind of
No,
against
the
ourselves.
city- no, we're not taking a position against the Board of Zoning Appeals. We're just basically saying we want to be involved in the proceedings to protect the interests of the city.
That's correct. And then the position that we take will be our decision to make. And what Jen is saying, that other people are gonna be following memorandums. We can look at those memorandums and we can decide to take a position or to take no position. But if we don't get our appearance entered on behalf of the city, then we're not in the game at all.
Well, then I suppose that that's a necessary step if we can't lose completely, so.
Right. And what would happen when Jen talks about unexpected consequences? What would happen if we stayed out
And had no
and
chance.
suddenly find out that the other two sides made an agreement that we find is like, oh my God, you did what? We would have never allowed that to happen. So, yeah, if we don't make the decision to
missing
get
the
involved.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm good with that.
We do.
And then we could decide our position. I just want to make that
Yes.
perfectly clear,
Mhm.
which I thought we decided, but I guess we didn't. So,
It's,
I thought
I'm
it
glad
was-
I'm not an
I thought it
attorney.
was decided for us that we couldn't.
it's,
Me
it's a
too.
complicated legal issue. It
It
truly
is, it is, it's convoluted.
So we have a majority who says we should enter.
Yes. And the other thing Jen was looking for was your authority to do these routine ministerial things for the board, is that correct?
Correct.
And
To enter, I would,
For the board that,
ministerial, here again,
So,
what
that-
she's talking about.
actually, based on this conversation, this issue has become a little more complex because it is possible then that the city could end up taking a position in this appeal that is contrary to the board's position.
So then maybe you can't do anything.
So,
which is what we wanted to avoid.
well, the question is, will the board be entitled, will the board be given counsel in this case? Will the city enter, and who will that counsel be for each of those two entities?
So it may have to get outside counsel to represent the board potentially, assuming the board is going to be represented.
So that doesn't go back
Okay,
to
so
like,
this-
doesn't go back to like us?
I'm so confused.
Right,
This just
us
sounds, I just hear dollar
against the
signs
city.
going off. Like, didn't we already discuss it? We can't go against the BZA. We are the BZA. I mean, we are not, but they are a
The
legal
courts can
entity. that's-
consider that, like, the courts can consider the fact that the BZA is an agent in a sense of the city, and that the city was in agreement with the BZA because of that.
You
Yes.
know, the best example I can give you, and it's not a real good example, but it is an example in our federal government. With the new administration came in, and the Assistant Attorney General, I already forget her name, said, no, I'm not going to make that argument in front of the Supreme Court. This travel ban's unconstitutional, and I'm not going to argue that it isn't. Now, it's analogous. We are not the person and the people who appeals. We were told we can't and we haven't, and we haven't.
Yeah, so I don't understand why we would get involved now. If we couldn't and we haven't.
Well, if we don't get involved, then you've already heard that things could happen that we have no control over. If we get involved, we can get involved and say, we're totally deferring. We're not going to take a position either way, but we want to be in the case to make sure that if something goes awry, that we're involved.
We're there to protect the
Yeah,
interests of
we're
the
there to
city.
protect
So
the
we
interest
didn't
of the
start
city.
it necessarily, we're just there in support.
Well, we haven't even decided what our
We haven't-
position is.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
We
haven't
haven't
decided.
had a public discussion
Jen's-
about what our position is going to be.
What Jen is asking is, can she do some of the legwork for the Board of Zoning Appeals vis-à-vis the court system? You know, whatever
Right, but
documents have to be filed and that type of thing.
But I'm just trying to picture you doing that legwork.
Well,
that
she
is in a
is too.
manner that is supportive of their argument, while at the same time representing us as just this third party saying, we have the same attorney submitting documentation
Well,
that is
Jen
to
is
the
having the
contrary.
same problem, I
Right.
think.
There's
Yeah,
no
that's a
way
problem.
that can happen.
That's a problem.
But there's no way that I see this body wanting to do otherwise.
I might
So either stay
suggest-
out or BZA gets their own
BZA
counsel, but that's kind of hard to say, they gotta
BZA
go
gives
get
their own
separate
counsel, the
counsel.
city pays for that counsel.
Right.
Right, so the other
That's-
thing, so, and if
there's
you
the
don't,
problem.
and if you don't do
There's the
that,
problem.
well,
That's a
let's keep in
problem.
mind something. Hold on, if you don't do that, who's gonna represent the BZA if we don't do that?
That was my next question.
Is the city attorney
You
gonna
say no to
represent the
you.
BZA? And what's the city attorney's position going to be? Is it going to be
Shouldn't be the
they
same as
support the decision of the BZA? And is that what we wanna do as a body?
If
Is
we sit out,
Should be.
does that mean you still
It's your
automatically,
BZA.
does that
should
mean
be your
if we
position.
say, you know what, the city doesn't want to participate? Are we obligated to automatically send our city legal counsel to do that work for the BZA?
I'm not aware of any provision that
Requires.
requires that.
Well, and so listen,
But then-
don't we get right into this issue? If we let Jen represent the BZA, okay? And what is the position of the BZA? We defer to the court judge. That's the position of the Board of Zoning Appeals. There's an appellant who said what you did was wrong. And there's gonna be a cell tower people there that said, no, what you did was right. And our city attorney representing the interest of the Board of Zoning Appeals is gonna say, on behalf of the Board of Zoning Appeals, we defer, Your Honor. You got two parties here making arguments, we defer to whatever you wanna do. And you can do the same thing then if you make a decision that Jen is also going to represent the city and defer. Then we don't need two attorneys. We have directed our city attorney to represent the city's interest and the BZA's interest and defer.
But what kind of example does that set for the BZA, especially going
Right.
forward?
I mean, they're gonna look at that and go, well, I don't wanna be on that board. You know what I mean? I'm not.
Well, what kind of example does it set if we, I think it sets the same example if we say, oh, we're not gonna participate. But do you want, what's this example, do you wanna set the example of having the city attorney present the position that the BZA was right?
Isn't
But
that
it's our
as a city,
BZA.
but isn't that what we're supposed, I
It's
mean,
our
I'm not-
BZA.
even if we disagree personally, isn't that as a city, that's what we're supposed to do?
I mean, we've appointed them, and,
I would say yes.
I mean, we're supposed to
I mean,
support their decision.
I recognize that our personal
Huh?
opinion.
I don't agree that we're supposed to support their decision. We're an independent body and they're an independent body. This is, the people who are gonna make the decision is a judicial decision. And again, I mean, that's my position. My position is, you know, I am not in support of having the cell tower there. In the same respect, I never heard enough citizens to come forward to convince me, for instance, that we should be paying for an appeal. I think deferring to the court is quite appropriate. You're not taking any position at all. You're saying, Judge, you got two interesting arguments here, and we're not taking a position either way.
Well, I'm okay with that, no position.
Well, we've been
necessarily.
saying that for probably the last,
But that allows Jen
Well, I
then to get
know.
involved with the case, and it allows her to do the ministerial things for the board that she's asking to be allowed to do.
I liken it to, listen, you can't win the Powerball if you don't play. So at least if you put Jen in, and put us in as entering into it, but with no opinion, at least we then get the information that the court receives. And as like Lou said, we may be able to stave off something that those two entities work out that
Or,
are not to the
listen.
benefit of the citizens of Hagerstown as a whole.
The other thing is, when Jen says what she said, keep this in mind, both sides are gonna be following memorandums, okay? So, we may end up seeing these memorandums and finding on either side, while we don't necessarily wanna take a position on this overall picture, they may make claims that we totally disagree with, depending on what they say. We don't know what they're gonna say, okay? But going into it, we should have a neutral position, defer, we look at the memorandums, as long as there's not anything that we see in there that goes, that's outrageous, that's not a correct position, whatever it be. And I'm not even talking about the ultimate issue, just some
Right.
factual
Right.
allegation that we can say, that's not right.
And put in by either party.
That's what I say, by either side.
Right.
If we see something that we see is factually incorrect, we have a duty to correct that issue. But so,
But if we aren't a player, or if
We
we aren't
can't.
in, then that
That's
doesn't
right.
matter.
you got
We
it.
don't get those memorandums, we
You
don't get
got
any
it.
of that information.
Well, then let's put
So
it
the
out.
best thing to do is to get in, let Jen do the work for the BZA that she has to do, up to the point where if the council wants to take a position at that point, she needs to step away and we need to get private counsel.
It's
For
a
the
possibility,
BZA, right.
depending on how things progress.
Right. So are we good with going that route?
I am.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not.
I'm not.
I don't understand.
I don't have any interest in having her represent the BZA in any manner, legwork or anything.
Oh, so it's not about
Oh.
getting in, it's about not having her represent the
That's
BZA.
right.
Although, I mean, and I know I haven't done this as long as Lou, but I know that over the last 20 years that I know of, whenever there was an issue with the BZA, our attorney represented them.
But I think the difference is this time she may have to represent us.
But until that time, it doesn't matter.
We have three
So-
that said yes.
Right, but we won't know unless we
Unless we,
enter.
unless we
Right.
enter.
So we won't know that answer until we, and if we don't enter, then
Oh,
we
you don't have a problem with
can't.
entering.
Okay, so that's, right, the second part of it with Jen being a representative of the BZA, and that can't be decided until we enter.
Has our attorney ever,
right?
Lou, do you remember the city attorney ever coming to the city council and saying, listen, there's been an appeal on a BZA decision, do you want me to represent the BZA? No, because it's automatic. Our council represents the BZA. It's automatic.
Then why are we being asked?
I think she wants
She
an
was
opinion
asking
from
whether
us
we should
about
enter
what
appearance
she-
on behalf of the city versus the BZA, is that correct?
Correct. And with the understanding that this is a unique scenario where the two parties may not be
in agreement.
in agreement.
Right, but we aren't taking a position, so we don't know. So we need to get in and see what leads from there.
So the question that we're being asked is whether we enter, right?
Right.
Not,
Bottom line,
that's it, that's the only question that
the
we're
only
being
question
asked.
right now, yeah.
Then my answer is yes, because we don't know the other answers until we enter, because of the Powerball scenario. Got ya.
Lou, still yes?
Yes, sir.
Awesome.
Yes.
You guys are still no's?
Correct.
Okay,
I'm not-
3-2, we enter. We'll play it by ear after that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
That was probably the most confusing.
Main Street Program Update.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, Jen.
Literally.
Sure it's clear for you.
Good afternoon. I'm here to provide an update on the Main Street Hagerstown program. With me are a few of the volunteer co-chairs. We have Monica Wortman and Sean Griffith, Aaron Petternance, and Paul Fry is also here. The city was designated a Main Street community in October of 2014, and the program was officially launched in the spring of 2015. Main Street programs are nationwide with over 2,000 across the country and 22 designated Main Streets here in the state of Maryland. Main Streets work by helping to create a vision for the future that is then brought to reality through continuous incremental successes. It is a community-led approach with over 700 volunteer hours contributed to the Main Street Hagerstown program in the previous fiscal year. I'd like to now invite some of our chairs to come up and I'll actually pass the microphone around for them to talk a little bit about their work groups and some of the successes that they've had and some of their goals that they have for their groups. So.
Hi, I'm Monica Wortman, and I'm the organization chair for Main Street. And organization has kind of shifted their responsibilities a little bit. We've taken on events and quarterly events, so we've had a couple really successful ones, starting with the Chris Kindermark in December, and then we had Sweets Fest during Run Fest, or the St. Patrick's Day Run, and then on June 16th, we have another new one, which is Chalk Art Festival. It's going to be on the Arts Trail, on the Cultural Trail, in front of the big mural. And we have several artists that are going to be painting. We're going to have some art judges out there and giving out prizes. There's going to be kids' activities and some vendors. So it'll be a fun family day in 2 weeks. And then the other one we have planned for this year is a drumline battle downtown. That'll be August 24th, and then we're going to do Chris Kindermark again in December. And that'll even be better and bigger than last year. So, well, also, we've been working, we did have a leadership planning retreat a couple of months ago that all of us attended, and we came up with some plans of going forward and restructuring a little bit to fit our abilities as chairs and co-chairs a little bit better than, just because there's an example doesn't mean you can't shift a little bit. So we've been working on connecting with other groups in town, and part of that was, like we found out just recently that the Mansion House, for instance, didn't know that we were Main Street. So I informed them on that. They had an 85th anniversary up there, so I'm not sure if any of us could go because it was a last minute thing, but they're now aware, so we're trying to pull even more artists into the fold. I attended the Washington County Creatives Forum. That was a couple weeks ago, both as an artist in the morning and also as a representative of Main Street. And we all feel it's important that all of us are connected. If we have too many groups that are doing the same thing, then we're spinning our wheels. So why not come together and try to get those efforts going at the same time? So if we're all aware of each other, then we can make this a better place to live, work, play, and eat.
I'm Sean Griffith, the co-chair for Clean, Safe, and Green. Also, Joanne Balaji is a co-chair. She wasn't able to make it today. Primarily, we focus on cleanups and plantings twice a year. Fall and spring, we'll do plantings along East Franklin Street. This past fall, we actually went into the square a little bit, did some plantings in there. Problem with that was we found they just didn't last. They weren't getting water taken care of. Where the ones on East Franklin Street, we see the city staff, I believe, actually go out there and water the plants, take care of them, and keep them good. So we'll continue to do that. We also do litter cleanup periodically throughout the downtown area. We're looking for more volunteers. Like Mike said, we did a volunteer recruitment. We got a few more people that want to work with our group, so hopefully we can kind of expand the radius of the cleanup, community cleanup, get a little further into the neighborhoods and do a little more frequently. We've also created bookmarks, postcards, literature, dealing with the different aspects of the committee. We give a lot of that out, National Night Out. A lot of it's kid-oriented, so they're kind of aware of, how long does it take for a glass bottle to recycle or deteriorate when you throw it on the ground. And some of them are pretty interesting things I didn't know about. So really a lot of it's educational, trying to get out in the community, let people know what they can do to keep the community a little cleaner, potentially a little safer. Another aspect, we advocated for the downtown benches. I don't know if you probably are aware, there's 4 benches that were put downtown. I think they've really been a success. One of the things we're concerned about, people maybe sleeping on the benches, those kind of things happening. And I haven't seen it. I haven't really heard anybody complain about it. So I think that worked out quite well as the downtown lighting. Coming on the square, we advocated to kind of enhance and get rid of those old, outdated bulbs, put in LED and kind of just spread out from the square and move that out a little further in town. We put 4 more in, I believe, this year. Hopefully a few more can go in next year until we get things brightened up a little bit so everybody feels a little safer downtown, can see a little bit better. So those are primarily things we're working on, continue to work on, and keep them going year round. And we're also looking at different things we can do out there to kind of help enhance the community as a whole. Okay.
Thank you.
Hi. So right off the bat, I want to jump to our flagship project, which is a year-round Christmas tree / cell tower in the. No, the sort of purview of the design committee, which is what I chair, is the beautification and maintenance of the historic character of downtown as a sort of third party to the council and the Historic District Commission. We've done the storefront, sort of faux storefront images. We're working on the replacement of all the pole banners, a new exciting design for that. Working as a liaison between business owners and the city and helping that process move a little smoother and be less intimidating. But other than that, I think we're chugging right along. Of course, we can always, use more money and more manpower, but that's not my discussion to have. So, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Good evening, almost, Mayor and Council, and Valerie. Good to see everyone here this morning. I do want to acknowledge the work that Amanda's doing. She is the liaison with the city, and Danelle also comes out to visit with us. So thank you for the work you're doing. She keeps us moving forward and keeps us connected. So thank you. So I chair the Business Relations Work Group, and our main job is to engage the business owners in Main Street. And some of the work we have done, we've come before you with our focus group work with business owners and prospective consumers. We've also, this past year, had a program with a professional walkthrough service. We had a grant. We didn't have anyone take us up on an offer, but it was a good idea to have someone who's looking at a building to get an engineer to walk through, or an architect, and look at the big picture, what the issues might be. We've also worked with city staff to, this past year, brand the Gigabit fiber opportunity. We worked with a couple restaurants. And so again, we want to engage our businesses downtown, and part of that work is being ambassadors for them and letting them know that just by virtue of being downtown, they're a member of Main Street, and they don't have to do anything else other than to just know that they're part of our group. So looking ahead to this fiscal year, we want to continue to work with city staff, economic development, and act as ambassadors on behalf of the city with the businesses. And we'd like to encourage economic development for the city to either get groups or individuals to come to the city to visit what the opportunities are, and we would be happy to visit with them and tell them the opportunities and be ambassadors with the city staff. We also want to continue our outreach to the Main Street businesses. This past few months, a number of us have gone out to the businesses, told them about Main Street, introduced them to Main Street, let them know we're available to help them, and many of them were unaware of us, and so we think it's a good deal or a good opportunity to provide the information to them and really the awareness of what we're doing in Main Street, and there are resources available. Some good news, surprising news, their businesses have been down for 20 years. And so we've thanked them for being down there, and that's encouraging to us that they've been down there that long. We are going to conduct 2 more focus groups. We'll do one probably by September with the business owners again. There was a number of business owners that were unable to participate our last time around. We also want to do next focus group once school is back in session with the college students downtown, and also some of our younger folks down there, just to get their feedback on downtown, what they think the opportunities are. We want to continue to increase attendance at our monthly business forums, the 3rd Thursday of the month. We have different topics, including, we'll probably have the new chief of police at one of these. We haven't told him yet, but we had the former chief down there. We had economic development down there talk about the opportunities that were available as well. And then finally, trying to be a fast second, we heard of this community called Covington, Kentucky, and we'd like to make a visit as a small group to go down there and drive down there for a day, visit with them, see what they're doing, see if we can borrow some good ideas. So those are some things we have done and some of the things we'll look to do this coming year. And we certainly would like to have your input, and we'll report back to you as we move forward.
Thank you. Thank you all. And also not able to attend was Melanie Anderson. She chairs our promotions group. Promotions works on our brochures, marketing, helping with social media, designing graphics and things like that for our events. So that's our update. I just want to thank our co-chairs and all of our volunteers that come and attend and help us with these events and putting on all of these projects. Really wouldn't work without any of them, so. Any questions?
Thanks. I do have to say, I mean, you know, I drive through the city every morning to get to work, and if you, I'm sure everyone sees it too, you know, it's be the change that you want to see. So with Main Street and everything that you and the volunteers and the chair people, you know, it's improved. It's lovely. You know, the plantings it's lovely. So, and the fact that you've gone to 2,500 likes is that's pretty good, you know? That's a lot of likes in a year's time. So keep up the good work. I think it's amazing. I've been to a volunteer recruitment event, and, you know, congratulations. It's working.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, man. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your volunteering and your help. Next up, Amanda, is the daily use of Borough Box Conference Room.
So wanted to review a proposed recommendation to make the conference room at the Borough Box available for daily rental by non-members. Currently, the conference room is available only to members of the Borough Box as part of their membership fee. And while the purpose of the Borough Box is to assist startups and businesses, new businesses to grow and launch out into storefronts or larger offices, we recognize that existing businesses and nonprofits may not have access to a conference room, which could be an important amenity to their own growth and success of their business. So the following outline just kind of recommends how the daily rental could operate. We recommend a fee of $135 for a half day of use by a for-profit business and a $75 for a half day use by nonprofit. It would be 100% self-guided with no staff support. The renters would potentially come to the DCED's office to pick up the key and kind of get a quick rundown of any of the equipment and things in there that they might need to use, and then reservations could occur 2 weeks in advance. That's pretty much a overview of the recommendation.
Have you compared to, what is it, the Martinsburg hub, their office? Because they charge considerably more,
Yeah.
which you probably are aware of.
Yeah, we did look into that, and I can't remember off the top of my head what their rentals were.
It's $250 for
but
a half a day.
It was pretty high, yeah.
Yeah, their arrangement is a little bit different from ours, but are you kind of thinking that that's the way that the Borough Box will go, which is, you know, very meeting, but very casual, very hip, which is kind of what I think your vibe is going for too?
Sure, yeah. And the hub offers a few other amenities that we aren't able to provide, which I think they have a cafe or a cafeteria and a few other things like that. So kind of makes up for, I think, their increased rental fee than ours, but yeah.
So are you kind of thinking that direction too? Because their meeting space also kind of combines for, people are always looking for an event space. And even though we went to the grand opening today, you know, I think that the Borough Box would be another opportunity to kind of do that kind of thing.
I'm not sure, I'd have to look further into that, because we got the USDA Rural Development Grant for that space. There may be a conflict with using that as an event, community-type center, but I can look more into that.
Well, as you know, I'm in full support of using, you know, this was kind of I spearheaded this just a little bit, so, I mean, I'm all for it. I think it's a good opportunity.
Is there an opportunity for downtown restaurants to cater some of the events that for-profits might have?
Yes, definitely. We've had a few of the restaurants provide, the Business Relations Work Group holds a meeting in there, and so they've had Jerry's Subs and Pizza and other downtown businesses provide food, as well as SCORE puts on workshops, and they have other restaurants provide catering. So
That might be a good idea if we can make the renter aware of businesses that
Specialized, you know,
that are
recommended caterers and such.
recommended, and the businesses that are set up to do that.
Yeah.
You know.
I think this is very inexpensive, actually, Amanda, you know? I mean, if you come to my office for a meeting, it is awful, it is terrible, so I would pay, you know, I'd be more than happy to pay this, so.
We're never coming to your office.
Oh, if you want to play pool, you can, but it's really dirty. It's a shop, it's a warehouse.
The only thing I think is 2 weeks in advance. Are we that busy that, that we have to do it 2 weeks in advance? I just think that might be a turnoff to some people if they have a meeting in the next couple days. It may be just available as needed.
Sure, I can look into that and see if we can shorten it.
Or make special exceptions.
Yeah. I mean, the idea was just, giving staff enough time that if they need to run through equipment, that they're not overextending themselves a little too much, trying to show people how to use the equipment, but we can look into shortening that.
Do you get a lot of requests for this, or was it
To
just
use
like kind
just
of
the
when?
conference room?
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
I don't think people know that it's there,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because it's really awesome. Okay.
As soon as we hire
That's what I was gonna say. As soon as we have a communication
Yeah, we
person.
can put
We're
that
getting
word
very
out.
close to
Yeah,
that.
it's,
Yep.
yeah, because the space is fantastic, so, I mean, I'm
Scott,
okay
let
with it.
Scott do, but I've seen his social media posts. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you.
You're up. Speaking of Scott. And can't forget Wendy Nussbaum, our Director of Human Resources. Welcome.
Good evening. We're pleased to inform you that the city has reached tentative agreement on a labor contract with Local 1605, the International Association of Firefighters Union. Within the packet, I don't know if they printed out the red line of the contract. You did, okay. As well as a memo that I'll refer to with the highlights of the agreement. There's two major provisions of the agreement that I want to highlight. The first is a compressed pay scale that takes the pay scale from a 23-step scale down to a 15-step scale. The other is changing the way leave has been provided or been allocated that allow firefighters the ability to use their allotted leave time that contractually they're given. First off, on the pay, since negotiations last year, additional pressures have been placed on the retention and recruitment of our firefighters. Both sides were able to negotiate a new pay scale that achieves the goal of the union to compress the scale from 23 steps to 15 steps, while also allowing the city to work with them on a compromise pay scale that consisted of a review of the current 23 steps, the proposed pay scale that the union provided, as well as looking at some new pay scales that have been introduced over the last year from the surrounding area. And with that, we were able to come up with a pay scale that actually turned out to be under budget from what was originally put in the budget book this year for us. So it ended up being a good compromise scale for both sides. We also feel that this puts us at a competitive level with other local departments and should be a factor in keeping the excellent staff that we've trained and ability to create recruit qualified new members when the need arises. Secondly, on the leave, we were able to negotiate a solution to a long-standing problem of providing enough leave slots for members to be able to take the leave that they are provided contractually. The solution was taking the solution the two sides negotiated as a result of a grievance from last fall that allowed for an additional two leave slots to provide all members the ability to take the leave that they're contractually supposed to have. The way it's worked in the past is if you were not able to take leave and you were left with 1, 2, 3, 4 days, you're able to sell that back. With the ability to now provide enough leave slots for all members to take leave, we've eliminated the need for sellback. And that was just basically taking the grievance resolution that was to be reevaluated in September, and making that part of the contract. The term of the contract is 4 years with a reopener on wages and benefits, possible in 2020. This puts this union back in the schedule of negotiations for all the other labor unions. We still have some minor wordsmithing and proofreading of the contract, because we also met last fall to look through this contract, because this was probably one of our more disjointed contracts. It didn't have the consistency of articles that the other contracts had. We had, at the back of the contract, there were just a bunch of miscellaneous paragraphs that were stuck in there that we've moved around and put them in places where we all agree that they should go, and makes more of a flow to the contract. That's where a lot of the red line comes in. You may see things like, different articles that are redlined as what might look like negotiated, but actually those are just moving from the back page to the articles where they're supposed to go. I'd like to thank members of both the city and union negotiating teams for the work that everybody put in. From the city side, Wendy Nussbaum, the HR director, Battalion Chief Adam Hopkins is here, is back there, Battalion Chief Russ Grimm. Also Heather Denny from the HR department was our note taker and was a godsend during the negotiations. Also, Fire Chief Steve Lohr for his support through the entire process. From the union, Greg Yergin as Chief Negotiator for the Fire Department, Todd Grimes, Steve Mitchell, Scott Wolf, and Brian Henry, and I think Brian's back there, and Greg's right here. Also, Justin Malott, the new president of the fire union, for the support that he provided and his insight. We participated in spirited yet productive discussions throughout the negotiation, and I believe we achieved a fair and equitable agreement, as I believe the union does. They ratified the tentative agreement on May 31st with a vote of their rank and file. What we would ask here is that we would recommend the mayor and council also ratify the contract in a special session on June 19th. Members of both our negotiating team and the union are available now if you have any questions, but then we'll also be available until you all vote in 2 weeks to clarify or answer any questions you might have.
You say there's additional wordsmithing. I had a couple of things I was going to bring up tonight, but I'll get with you offline.
Okay.
I did find some things that were unclear.
Sure, sure.
Anybody?
The only thing I would note is, Austin, you appropriately indicated in the last couple of weeks that we need to start doing the budget a lot faster.
Right.
And I think what you're gonna find is sometimes we don't even realize we're doing it. Because today is the first day of doing next year's budget. And seriously, but when you look at what the expense is gonna be there for it, that's how we get into where we're at, and this is the first step. I mean, I'm certainly in favor of this, but, yeah, that's the first step of the beginning of figuring out how to pay for it.
Anybody else?
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Great job. Thank you very much.
Actually, very good job.
Yes.
In fact, it appears from this end to have been painless, which is interesting. Yeah, that's, I think some people don't understand.
I'm staying.
Yes, you are.
Michelle's coming up. Keep losing my voice. A little over the 247.
Hello.
I can't remember exactly what it was. It was kind of close, but.
Well, thank you for having us here again. I want to reference in your packets as well, you'll find a memo proposing a step increase for all full-time, non-union employees who've been with us for at least 6 months, six full months. We also want to propose the addition of a step 14 on the non-union pay scale. We propose both actions with an effective date of July 2nd, 2018. We also propose an additional step increase to occur on an employee's anniversary date beginning next July 1st, 2019, and then thereafter anniversary dates. Attached to that memo is a chart that summarizes the wage adjustment history back to fiscal year 10 for all City of Hagerstown employees, which can also be found in section 1 of your fiscal year 19 budget book.
And actually, just to provide just a little bit of a history, I think prior to fiscal year 10, when a lot of the financial revenue came to a sudden halt and a lot of changes were made on the expense and the staffing side, within the normal policy in human resources here at the city, the MG group, which is basically the non-union group, moved, again, based on years of longevity. And so it was just a constant, as long as it was within the budget and the budget was approved, I don't think any additional formal action was taken. But in light of all steps being temporarily halted and frozen in time, if you would, back in fiscal year 10, just much like we've done on all the union contracts, we've brought this back. And if you look again at that chart, there's been some years where the non-union would move a step. There's been years where a little bit of a COLA was put in place, but we're looking really to mirror the non-union group now, much like the rest of all the other full-time positions in the city, so that once we're here this evening and bring back a motion, that full-time non-union would move one step July 1 and then wouldn't move again to the following July, but it would be effective on anniversary date. And we wouldn't have to keep coming back and do a separate motion as long as it was within the budget, just like the rest of the full-time staffing in the union contracts.
And just to clarify, this does include all employees from all departments that are non-union. So that would include your police department, your rank individuals, your fire department, everyone.
It's reflected across
that
all.
is not covered in the union.
Yep.
Okay.
So when I read this memo, it seems like exactly what you're suggesting is that we're making a decision for 2 years instead of 1 year?
Actually, I think once we're back to the position where we're not saying that any steps are going to be frozen, then we don't have to keep coming back yearly and saying, okay, do we move a step? Do we do a COLA? Do we move 2 steps?
Just
What do we do?
like we have, right.
Instead of continuing to bring that back, that we'll revert to the existing human resources policy,
Right.
organizational policy, to handle the non-union side.
Somewhat
like
similar, like we've done in the multi-year union contracts as well.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that, but we do those via a contract with those bargaining.
Right.
units. I mean, when I read this, I'm just going to assume it'll be included in a motion, where it says July 2nd, 2018 for one step increase for a full-time non-union employee, right?
Correct.
Then you got a second bullet that says beginning July 1, 2019, which is next fiscal year, all full-time non-union employees will advance an additional step on their anniversary date.
And continue on anniversary dates annually thereafter, much like in the union contracts. So
I hear what
until,
you're saying, but those are union contracts. I feel like what you're asking me to do here is agree to something in a manner that I would agree to multi-year agreements with union, like bargaining units.
actually, I
And
think
I don't-
we're more looking to be able to revert back to the existing policy that's in place. That steps are not going to be frozen for any group on a full-time basis once we get to next July.
Right.
That everybody
Yeah,
would
I mean,
start
I don't
having
know that I
movement on
can sit here
anniversary.
and- I don't know that I can sit here and say, you know what I mean? Those are contract obligations that I'm making. I don't know that I can sit here and say that I'm doing, I mean, I don't have a number here.
Six of one, half dozen of the other, because of what you just said. It's not a contract obligation.
Okay.
So we put it in, and if we can't afford it next year, we take it out, versus a contract which we're obligated to. Or we don't put it in, and next year, if we want to, we put it in. That's why I say, to me, it doesn't make much of a difference, because if it's not in the budget, it's not gonna happen. Whereas what we just seemingly passed is
Right.
gonna
Is in
happen,
the
because we
budget,
have a
right, correct.
contractual obligation, and we know it. So,
Correct. So the human resources policy currently states that as long as the information is included and is budgeted for by mayor and council. So again, this wouldn't continue if during budget negotiations, you know, any conversation is held otherwise.
And the step beginning July 1, 2019, that's built into the FY19 budget now?
Correct, because not everybody would move again on July 1, 2019.
On their
They would do it on their
anniversary.
anniversary date, so it would be staggered throughout the city, so that it's not all of that all at one time.
And if everybody increases a step during a year,
Correct.
what's the dollar figure?
It actually varies. So with the new contract that we're about to put in place with 1605 next year, if you looked at their contract that's in place through June 30th, just because they move a longevity step, there is no pay difference. But with their new contract, there will be a pay difference. If we look at 1540, which is like our largest union group, approximately 130 to 135 members at any given point in time, they get pay increases on year, forgive me if I say it wrong, year 1, year 2, I think again at year like 4 or 5, not again until year 9, year 14. So they only, even though their salary scale may be for 23 steps throughout that 23-year life cycle here, the pay increases only at like 5 or 6 times. If you look on the existing non-union salary scale, it varies between, once you get to the grades, it varies between the steps. So I would say maybe on average 3% if you looked at everybody across the board. But take 1540 out of that mix because they don't get one for every single step.
Are we okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, need to get a motion to go into 44th special session, please.
So moved.
All right, Emily and Shelley, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We're in special session. And that equates to an approval and exemption for City Code, Chapter 155, noise.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the approval of an exemption from the City Code, Chapter 155 noise. This exemption is being granted in accordance with Section 155-5 M to Foster's on the Point for an event on Sunday, June 10, 2018, from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Cool. City Administrator's comments?
Nothing additional.
Ms. McIntyre?
Had a great time at the Blues Fest this weekend. That was the first time I didn't go as a volunteer, so I really got to enjoy myself. Great job by city staff and Jill and her team. I know that Jill and Kitty are still in recovery mode, so had a great time. It was a great event for the city, and the feedback was very positive. So thank you for extending the invitation, and look forward to other opportunities. That's it.
Mr. Mixon?
Kudos to staff, and Saturday was just another day towards what most of the people in this community really don't have an idea of what's going to happen. And, you know, it's going to be an exciting time in Hagerstown. People will be complaining about traffic for a while, and that's okay. As buildings come down and buildings go up, and watching the Maryland Theater become unbelievable. And the only other thing I would say, there were 2 people that I were disappointed that weren't mentioned Saturday that need to be mentioned at the ribbon cutting, and that's Steve Sager and Jack Garrett, because we wouldn't be having a Maryland Theater to reconstruct if Sager and Garrett hadn't stood up to come up to the plate after the fire and made sure it got rebuilt then. But it was an exciting day, and it's going to be exciting times in Hagerstown.
No, just echo what Shelley said. The staff did an excellent job at the Blues Fest. I thought it was, it went off without a hitch. I couldn't ask for anything to have changed or be better.
I don't have anything.
I'm good.
I too want to thank staff and all those volunteers who helped put on the Blues Fest this weekend. And thanks to the governor for coming up and spending some time in Western Maryland. We appreciate that. I was remiss in not mentioning some people on Saturday, although Jessica asked me to keep mine short since others were long-winded. And that's our city administrator and our city engineer and planning and all those people who attend all those meetings all the time and put the hours in to make sure this project gets done. And we appreciate them, and their praise isn't sung enough, that's for sure.
Thank you.
I did get to go today to the to Potomac Heights and attend the We the People competition with 4th and 5th graders. That was fun. They talked about what makes a good citizen, what makes a good community, and what are some citizen responsibilities when it comes to the Constitution and being a good citizen. So it's a good time. Good to hear them. Actually, they I know they prepared, but they made sense, so that was great. So, thank you very much for having me at that event today. That's it for me. So we need to get a motion to go into executive session to consider a matter that concerns proposal for a business or industrial organization to locate, expand, or remain in the state.
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We'll take a short break and say 10 minutes, clear the room and all that good stuff.
Mr. Fitzgerald is here, so.
What a good 4-7?
Is available. Yep.